Welcome, everyone. Oh, wow. What a thrill it is to get to close out the seminar set for TexSom with this great set of wines from the SOMMFoundation cellar, as well as a few that have been kicked in by the TexSom people and some of our very generous supplier partners. So it's a great honor to be up here and to be representing SOMMFoundation. And I guess we want to start by saying thank you for your support of SOMMFoundation and your participation with SOMMFoundation. We've done a lot over the years, awarded over $1 million in scholarships. We've sent more than 1,000 sommeliers on enrichment trips around the world since we began back in the early part of the aughts. Please stay tuned to the new website because we're going to be launching some new things coming up in the latter part of the year. And we're very excited about it. Some things designed to garner some donations that will also result in an educational gift to anybody that participates with helping us keep our fundraising going. So on behalf of the board of SOMMFoundation, I want to say thank you in advance. A quick list of all the people that lead SOMMFoundation. And there's one name that's not up here, which is my mistake. I was privileged to be a part of the founders of SOMMFoundation, along with Fred Dame, Jay Fletcher, Nunzio Alioto. But please give a quick round of applause to Fred, because it was Fred's work and impetus that got this thing off the ground. Thank you, Jay. Pleasure. So, I got to tell a quick story. Some of you guys probably have seen me, buzzing around here on a scooter.
Do you want me to bring it up?
No, you blew it. And the story about how that happened was really not very exciting, so I've been making up a couple. And one of them is that, unbeknownst to many of you, Fred Dame and I were recently competing in the World Decanting Championships. And I was winning. Fred was close behind me in second, and he snuck up to my Garradon and knocked a 9-liter off of it, right onto my foot, shattered it. He Disqualified. Guy Stout won. Congratulations, Guy.
I would have tripped you, too.
My other idea was that, we were all here for the Master Sommelier Theory exam about a month ago, and I told a Republican joke in front of Larry O'Brien. He stepped on my foot. Thought you'd like that.
Bowling.
So how about we get into some wine?
Yeah.
Here's the list, guys. We're going to be tasting some very interesting things today, and we're kicking off with Emily Wines, leading us through a beautiful example of a very rare and unusual wine from around Vienna in Austria. And one note about this, if you see in this glass that it's a little low, we had a corked bottle of this, and so we had to, very carefully pour everybody, so we apologize for that, but as you know, this happens.
That's not true. We drank the other bottle.
Yeah.
Shh. Palate
Man,
cleanser.
you can't follow instructions. And in case you notice the cameras in the back, everyone, this is being filmed for Comedy Central.
All right. Well, as the token woman on the panel, I figure I should talk about the token white in the flight. And I just think this is a super cool wine, and I don't know, we've got maps and all that.
We do. You want to walk us through those?
We're master sommeliers. We can't talk about yummy wine without getting really geeky and showing you lots of maps about where it came from and the terroir and the geography and all that. But what's really cool about this wine is that it comes from Vienna, or Vienne. This is the only urban wine region in the world, and it's really interesting because within these city boundaries, you have some really interesting, very old vineyards that are very much a part of Viennese culture. There are over 700 hectares of vineyards within Vienna, and there's some really interesting things happening within this area. There's a lot of very young urban winemakers that are taking the flag for wine in Vienna, and experimenting with things like Shiraz. I don't know why you would plant Shiraz in Vienna, but they do. But then there's also some young winemakers who are taking the charge with bringing up these really traditional wines. I don't know, move forward. What else do we have in maps? There you are, another map. There's Vienna. Within the city of Vienna is where this really special Wiener Gemischter Satz wine comes from.
So what is a Gemischter Satz?
So Gemischter Satz are really unique in that they are field blends, and they very specifically have to be field blends. There's no picking these things separate. They have to be a minimum of 3 varietals. You can't have more than 50% of any one. The least amount in, or the third least amount in it has to be at least 10%. They have to be white. They can be designated as a specific vineyard, or they can be kind of broadly Gemischter Satz. These are DAC wines. Very cool stuff. And this guy right here is really the one leading the charge for this appellation. This is Fritz Wieninger.
Fritz Wieninger. And so we should probably go back and say the full name of the wine. Wieninger, Wiener Gemischter Satz, Alter Reben Nussberg, 2001. No, 2011, excuse me. And there's Fritz.
So Gemischter, the literal translation for Gemischter Satz is mixed set, and it's just a mixed set of grapes, whatever it happens to be. There are lots of regulations about what it has to be in minimums and maximums, but it's just a mixed set of grapes.
And really cool. This one is a mix of Riesling and Grüner Veltliner and Traminer. Just incredibly rich, really luscious. It's got incredible weight to it. I love it.
It's got a beautiful glycerol feel towards the end, just nice and round. Crisp acidity. Nice.
I don't think I want this wine in a blind tasting.
No.
I definitely don't want it
We're
to
saving it for the
blind
master exam for next year, in case any of you are.
Well, and also to note is that when you have a single vineyard, it has to be a minimum of 12.5% alcohol. So there's an incredible richness to these wines.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I love about this particular wine is obviously this was the person that put Gemischter Satz back on the map with this specific wine. But Gemischter Satz is so old; it is such a historical type of wine production, where we tend to forget that we're in the wine business. And that part of the business of selling wine back in the old days, hundreds of years ago in Austria, was that there were a lot of B&Bs and a lot of places where you would have to go stay. You'd need a place for your horse. You need food. You need to drink, because that's what we do when we travel, apparently. But you needed all of those things. But Austrian law was such that it all had to be done. You had to do everything that you sold. You had to kill the cow to make the steak that you would then grill to go along with the asparagus that you would have to grow. And everything they did had to be under one thing. Well, the only way to really ensure that you were going to get a crop and you were going to have wine to sell for your business was to have a mix of varietals that are planted or that ripen at very different times, and that's the mix. So that was the kind of the start of that Austrian industry.
And we sort of lost track of this style of winemaking sometime in the great crash of Austrian wine in the 80s. They had the big scandal with the ethylene glycol scandal,
yeah.
and that. There aren't a lot of people around in the wine business that actually still remember that at this point. Yeah, who doesn't like a little antifreeze in your wine? But that changed everything. The Austrians really just kind of had to go clean slate and start over in the late 80s and early 90s. And they did a remarkable job, but they lost this. And it was Fritz Wieninger that began to bring it back. And now it's becoming an important part of the set of wines from Wien again. And it's interesting to see. They launched it in 1999, and it became official in 2005, I think. They sort of reclassified it back into the law, and the Gemischter Satz became something again. And so it's very interesting to see these wines develop. It's in the city limits of Vienna, but it's not really urban. All right, any other questions? There's a quick picture of the label and Fritz.
It sums up Viennese culture in a bottle, as he likes to say.
It does.
Dry and tasty.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to Burgundy, Mr. Dame.
Let's get serious here for a second. I mean, you know, 200 years before the death of Jesus Christ, these vineyards were being planted by the Romans. They are truly one of the great pieces. I mean, Pliny the Younger names these vineyards.
The beer guy?
Names this region. Spending too much time in Sonoma there, brother.
Those are hops.
Not Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger, right? So there's an incredible history here. You know about Romani Conti, the famous stone that sits in the corner of the Roman surveying stone. And it's an amazing piece of history, not only of the world of wine, but really of culture and Western civilization. So after the end of the Dark Ages, the empire fell. Along came the feudal system, of which the Valois family, the Dukes of Burgundy, became one of the wealthiest families in France until Louis the Bold, the last of the Valois dukes, was killed, and of course the King of France immediately, right, took possession of all his lands in the Crusades. So in essence, when you look at this, this was the beginning. So the church, the Cistercians, and the Benedictine monks, and the nobility created these vineyards. And that's why when you see all these vineyards, imagine where it is today. Imagine what the AVA may be like 1,000 years from now, where in Grand Cru and Premier Cru, you can walk 1 meter sideways or 1 meter down the hill and go from Premier to Grand Cru. And all those beautiful vineyards, you know, are named by observation. You know, La Serpentière, right? The snakes. And it must have been a very good day on the day they discovered Les Amoureux, right? The female lovers.
Yeah.
Because what do monks do? Eat, drink, sleep, and pray, and drinking has to be the highlight of the day, right? It became very good. So all the Clos, all the Wall vineyards, but it's not going to history of Burgundy. We're presenting you two beautiful wines today from the Côte de Nuit. And these are some of the most legendary wines in the world. I mean, these are the wines of kings, the wines of nobility, the wines of Napoleon, you name it. And even today, when you see the prices of Romani Conti these days, how many people ordered a case of DRC this last year? Okay. How many people could afford a half bottle of DRC? Okay, well, that answers the question.
If you paid for it.
Right, as long as I paid for it. So, I mean, it's pretty
I can
astounding.
afford them out of your
what's happened.
cellar.
Yeah. And you've drunk plenty of them out of my cellar, so thank you very much.
That's happened before.
Quit hinting, okay? So, when we look at that, and I'm still astounded today that there are still white grapes there. The King of France decreed, and this law is still in the books, that because he so loved the red wines of the Côte de Nuit, that anyone producing anything with Pinot Noir in the Côte de Nuit would be executed, but first have their tongue torn out with red-hot pincers. So it's still in the
Seems
books.
fair.
I say we bring it back, right? Campbell Musing Blanc, I want to see that guy first, all right? That'll be the end of that. One good demonstration.
Come to Vogue, yeah.
So, suffice to say, we have two beautiful wines for you. The first being the Clos de Vougeot. I mean, one of the most historic. You got a picture of the Clos there. This is Domaine Valfer. What's fascinating is that, and there's the Clos de Vougeot.
And so it's not on this map. We had another map that didn't get used that's actually got the different names of the climats of Clos Vougeot. The Musigny Clos of Clos Vougeot is right there.
Right there
And
up in the corner.
This is north going this way. So that's sort of the northwestern corner. Just on the other side of that road is Musigny.
So, and if you see there, you see the Clos Vougeot there. Of course, you know, one of the most iconic, the home of the Chevalier Tastavan, and of the Hospice de Bon Auction, founded by Guillaume and Francois Salon in 1635, and the foundation of the Hospice system as we know it today. So Burgundy's produced some pretty spectacular things over the years. Clos Vougeot is even more fascinating now because in the current state, since they passed the Napoleonic Code, there are now more owners than there are vines. So here's your cluster.
Crazy.
You had a great year. Congratulations. Right? And you know, so for that reason, the negotiation system still is immensely powerful in this commune. As you can see, it's a beautiful place. If anybody's ever been or has the opportunity to attend the Trois Glorieuses, the 3 glorious days of the Chevalier Tastavan, it is truly one of the most amazing 3 days. So suffice to say, this is, you know, a very, very unique place. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nights ago, I was drinking the 04 of this wine from Magnum at an event we did
It's
in...
good to be Fred.
Yeah, it's good to be Fred. And I think we drank all 6 Magnums. So I think we drank the entire allocation for the United States of America in one night. And it was superb. So let's all taste this wine. If you don't like that, you'll never understand Burgundy.
If you don't like it, just bring your glass up
Right?
here,
You'll never
please.
understand Pinot Noir, right? And you'll be an outcast. So who in the room likes this wine? I better see every hand. So earthy, rich, showing its age, but that's what we try to do with this event every year, is to show you wines with some age because they're rare. And by the way, this wine has only ever been transported 2 times in its lifetime. So we have a provenance on this. We know where it came from. We know where it is, and these are original bottlings. These were served, in, by the way, in half bottles, which I can't believe. I don't think it made half bottles of Grand Cru vintages in,
I've stopped seeing them about 10 years ago.
Except for at the winery. Yeah, I see it with the winery when they're having events and things like that. But I think this wine is just beautiful, it's superb, and it's a great example. We tend to forget Clos Vougeot sometimes when we think of the Côte de Nuit, and it's a sad thing because they truly do produce some of the most beautiful wines in the world. And they're wines of depth, of power, and I think in this thing, when you see that, this is, in the case of this wine, because it's not a half bottle, I think we're drinking it maybe just a bit over the top. I mean, on the other hand, it won't be any better next week than it is this week, so it's a good day to be drinking this Clos Vougeot.
It's gorgeous.
Fred, I think it's important to point out that in the case of Clos Vougeot, it's not enough to know that Clos Vougeot is a Grand Cru and that there are special wines there. You have to know about the producer, because there's Clos Vougeot and then there's Clos Vougeot. There are, I think the number is 80 owners of this vineyard.
It takes up 2 slides, so we didn't put them all up there.
It's a big vineyard, but as you can see, but 80 different entities own this vineyard. And so it's really important to know exactly who's making it, where their parcels are, and what their pedigree is. So this
The
is
soil changed a lot through the vineyard.
soil changes a lot from the vineyard, and it also depends very deeply on the viticultural practices, because you have one grower that's negligent and another grower like this one, Gros Frères Sur, which is exceptional. And they have this parcel in the Musigny section of Clos Vougeot, and they are one of the very best regarded growers in all of Clos Vougeot. So it's a real treat to be able to taste this. You know, we could dig up some other Clos Vougeot that wouldn't be anywhere nearly as exciting, I promise you.
Yeah. I mean, you've got, as they said, the pedigree, the location of this vineyard, the location of this parcel of Clos Vougeot is absolutely the very best. It is literally the wall. It goes down a little bit in elevation. There's a very tall wall there, which every now and then there's a hole in the wall that you can look through, and it makes a nice picture. But right 5 feet away is Musigny, which is my personal favorite Burgundy vineyard there is.
Ditto.
And it's right next to it, but it is very different. So.
Yeah, I think this wine is a great example of what it is. And again, I think Clos Vougeot sometimes gets overlooked, but you see what's there. It's produced well. But don't get all crazy when the vineyards, especially in Burgundy vineyards, when you talk, well, I'm biodynamic. Well, great, for your 3 rows. Yeah. The guy next to you is out there with a sulfur gun, you know, right?
And when you're not looking, he's doing yours. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're biodynamic. Ignore that can of Roundup in the corner.
Yeah.
So in the case of this, especially in Clos Vougeot, you have to be very, as Andy pointed out, very mindful of your neighbor's practices, right? And they can be very helpful to you in certain years.
Yeah.
And this is an ancient family estate. They were established around 1820, and it's like into the 5th or 6th generation. You may know Anne Gros, who is fairly famous on her own. Her Musigny is about as good as it gets. But 5 generations in, they are based out of Von Romanet, but their home base is right there, the Vougeot.
Everybody like this wine? Mm-hmm. Any complaints?
Yes. Little
Yeah. Oh, we got a complaint. Bring yours up, please, sir.
What, because you drank yours? That's not my problem. But we're going to get into that in just a minute. I mean, so you think this wine is too oaky?
See me after. I'll show you oak.
All right. Gloves off.
Never mind. Never mind.
No, I mean, no, let me be honest with you, it's a very good point he makes. Because the tendency amongst Grand Cru is to do what? Use as much
Yeah.
expensive new oak as you possibly can.
Yeah, what's the guy's name that does 200% new oak?
Right. No. So when you think about that, you know, that's, and sadly, that's kind of what the public expects today. It's what, do I agree with it? No. Some years, yes, but most no. On the other hand, I think this wine, it is showing its oak, it's showing its age, but the fruit's still intact. And at a half bottle for its age, I think this wine is doing pretty darn nice. Thank you very much.
It was not decanted, and if you've got a little...
They were all double decanted.
Not this one.
Oh, they didn't decant that?
No, they didn't. I asked.
Oh, you asked, okay.
And, you know, and because I wanted to know, because this wine, it is throwing a little bit of the dirt, but that's sort of the joy of Burgundy. And Fred and I have a ongoing decant or not decant debate, and I decant. Because
I non-decant.
I,
Pretty much anything.
like
That's
I
why God made
said,
teeth to filter wine.
like I said, yeah. But anyway, yeah, there's a little bit of dirt in here, but the oak is obvious.
That's terroir, my friend.
Terroir, yes, of course. But it's rounded. It is influencing the wine a bit, but the real the terroir, the taste of the place comes through very well. As soon as I picked up the glass, I was, bam. Wow.
Transported right back to the Trois Glorieuses that I can't remember.
There you are.
I'll tell you one thing about Burgundy that I tell all the people, because Burgundy is my passion, you know, it's my muse. You could read every book, you could look at every map in the world, but until you walk it one time, none of it really makes any sense.
I'll argue you walk it 20 times, and then it starts to make sense.
You know, but I mean, you know, you see it one time, you walk it one time, and you're like, ah, okay, now I get it, right? And so you can say that probably about any wine region in the world, but I think in particular Burgundy it's endemic for you to see it. So I challenge you to go to Burgundy.
Right after Spain.
Right after Spain, right? A lady with a plan, I like that, okay. I thought that wine was just lovely. And again, it's Grosser. If you want to call it a little bit on the old school side of winemaking, to your point, sir, it is a little bit of old school winemaking. But I'll tell you what, I have no problem drinking it whatsoever. And I'm going to drink those dregs, and I'm going to filter them right through my teeth.
Any last questions
just
on the
did.
Clos Vougeot before we move on?
It's,
Yeah.
No.
Any other questions? No, but it was nice.
Definitely not. I actually believe that you are all enjoying the last bottles of this that we have in the SOMMFoundation cellar today. We use this wine at the Rudd Roundtable, the Johnson dinner. Mm-hmm. Jeff Johnson was our first benefactor that donated a great deal of wine to establish the SOMMFoundation, and you know, we owe him a great debt of gratitude. But we use these wines in educational and fundraising purposes, and I'm almost positive that this is it. So here's to Jeff, and here's to you.
Cheers.
Cheers. So moving right along.
Why were those Magnums good?
Yeah.
Number 3, Fred.
Okay, Magnan Mounier, I mean, a spectacular producer, consistent, beautiful. And again, now we come along to and every time we talk about the Côte de Nuit, everybody seems to forget Echezaux, right? And Grands-Echezeaux. And you know, they sit right in the happiest place, one of the happiest places in Burgundy, and they produce,
Right there.
right there, you see it?
Yeah.
So Vougeot, Nuit-Saint-Georges, Chaumont-Musnier, that's a very, and Romani, that's a very, very happy place to be. We tend to forget them sometimes. But there's a reason that DRC produces Echezaux and Grands-Echezeaux. And I will tell you that I think they're the last true sleeper wines where there's actually a fairly decent value for Grand Cru, right? So let me give you all a little tip there. Not DRC wines, but other Echezaux and Grands-Echezeaux wines. There's a softness to them that I don't think appeals to some of the more well-known, I don't say critics, writers on Burgundy. But over the decades that I've been doing this, I've developed a great affinity. One of the great treasures of my personal cellar is a Magnum of DRC, 1969, Grands-Echezeaux, Magnum 0001.
Wow.
Right? Aubert's been trying to get it for 20 years. Huh? So, that's going to go to me, by the way, when it's die, it's going to my casket. It's going to be like the Arkenstone, right?
Hey, Fred, it's going in your casket empty.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. That's why you're not speaking at my funeral, Jay.
I'm going to that funeral.
It will go in empty.
These are my friends, not my enemies. Right.
We'll pour one out for you.
Yeah.
I just want you to pick up this glass just for a moment. And you know, sir, I do see oak in this, right? But I think it's
indeed.
more in balance, to your very good point earlier. But look at that nose. You know, a lot of times, if you're a really experienced taster of Burgundy, you can point to Chambon-Musigny, you can point to Mort-Saint-Denis, you can point to Chambertin. But Echezeaux seems to always kind of fool everybody. And I love it because of the beautiful balance in the nose and the flavor. It's just, that's a pure example of a great classic Burgundian Pinot Noir. And when you taste it, I'm going to try and do this for you, madam, to the best of my ability. I'm good. This is what I call a Mufasa wine. You all seen The Lion King, right? When the three jackals are up there and they're like, Mufasa. Like, say it again, Mufasa, right? You get the goosebumps and all that stuff. I mean, that's classic. I don't care what part of Burgundy it comes from. I don't care where it is. That's Grand Cru Burgundy. You want to know what Grand Cru Burgundy should be like for the rest of your life? Taste that wine, right? And that is what a Grand Cru Burgundy wine is. Great producer, underappreciated, and somewhat, in my mind, unloved appellation of Grand Cru, but one of the great values left, and a wine that produces wines of such softness and delicacy on the palate that consistently, whether they're young or they're old, they produce that same beautiful quality. So I don't think that they're not going to last. I've had some incredible wines from the last century, from these vineyards, from the 1800s, pardon me, and this wine is a great example of that. And you know, you might think it might be seen its age, but I guarantee you, we could be doing this tasting 20 years from now, and this wine would still be beautiful, because its balance is perfect.
This wine's got a real firm grip in the end, and the acid and the tannins balance perfectly. You can see the runway ahead of this wine. There's many more years to go.
I've had some very old bottles of this. They were at the winery, but there's just such an elegance, and the thing to me that defines Grand Cru versus all but the very, very, very best Premier Cru, there's just a textural element that you get with Burgundy. That to me, it's not about necessarily how it tastes or what a tasting note is. There's a textural part for me that defines the vineyard and defines the place. And there's no place else on earth that does that. And that's Burgundy has become, that's my whoopee. It's my little blankie. It's great.
This wine is also my whoopee in a very real way. You know, we all have the wine that got us in, you know, the one that hooked us. And mine is a different vintage, but it was the Montjardin Grands-Echezeaux. I was at a wine festival early in my career, a very young somm in my hometown, Atlanta. And the guy that was working the vineyard brands table had a bottle of this under the table and poured me a little bit in a plastic cup, and my life changed forever. And it was this wine.
The family owns a hotel in Von Romani called Le Richebourg, where they serve.
He's currently being sued by Aubert de Belen. Right?
It's a great hotel though. So.
Well, actually, and on the note about Pinot Noir and Burgundy in general, raise your hand if Burgundy was your kind of gateway wine. Yeah. There's kind of nothing more ethereal and magical than great Pinot Noir. It's life-changing.
You know, when you think about it, so you all know Gary Pizzoni is, right? So Gary Pizzoni and I kind of grew up together, and
Explains a lot.
Boy, doesn't it?
yeah, it explains a lot. But when Gary first got into wine, because they're famous for broccoli and asparagus, I probably at Sardine Factory in Monterey, where I was a somm, I probably sold him $500,000 worth of Bordeaux before I convinced him to try one Burgundy. And look where it ended up for him. It's the magic of Burgundy and Pinot Noir. There's a lushness and a richness to this wine. It's not the biggest, baddest wine on the planet, but every time you taste a great one, you remember it. And that's what a truly great wine is, you know, if you have a memory of it. And the best thing is you'll be able to walk out of the seminar today and go, oh yes, I was studying with the Master Sommeliers, you know, tasting the Noir 06 and the Gros, you know, Grand Crus 05. And that's why you go to a seminar, right, to have somebody to impress your friends with, right? So I just gave you 2 great reasons right here. I mean, you know, you're going to walk out the door, there being 10 up on everybody else standing outside there waiting.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Did you all like this wine?
Yes.
Isn't that beautiful?
Bravo.
Yeah. You know, we're so, let me just say thank you to Jay and to SOMMFoundation, because when the cellar, when we started the organization, a decade ago, Jay?
15 years ago.
50, God, oh my God, 15 years. That's right, more than, 15.
Yeah, 2004, the paperwork came through.
When we received this donation, we determined that all these bottles would always be used for these type of purposes. And ever since, we've been pouring these wines at this event. And it's a great honor and pleasure to share them with you, because this is what we believe and we hope you believe. So thank you all very much for enjoying them.
So staying in Pinot Noir,
Yeah.
Emily, tell us about Williams-Sonoma.
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to talk about Sonoma, because this is a region that's very near and dear to my heart, having spent a lot of time up there, lived up there a little bit. It's a really diverse region. I mean, yeah, Napa's great, Jay. But
Hey, we make wines in Sonoma, too.
this is true.
Paso.
Yes, Paso's great too. But, I mean, but Sonoma. I mean, come on. I mean, like the diversity of the styles of wines that you can have, and like when you look at these appellations, and it is, I mean, that is some confusing shit up there. Like you see, like there's a lot of different appellations, and things are based on political boundaries, and some of it's about soil, some of it's about climate, and the truth is like when you're up there, it is so different from corner to corner of this county. Radically different soils. They say there's more soil types in Sonoma than there are in all of France, which makes sense because there's a lot of stuff going on there. But particularly what we're talking about is Pinot Noir, and again, real diversity of styles of Pinot Noir that you get throughout the county. But this area here of Fort Ross, Seaview, up in the hilltops, right above the fog line, it's really unique, and there's some really special wines being made up here. It's unbelievably remote, but often gets more sun than parts of the Russian River where it's low and the fog really hangs out. And Williams-Sonoma.
But it's cold as hell.
It is cold as hell.
I was out there about 4 weeks ago.
It was like 60?
It was middle of the afternoon, like hottest part of the day, 5 o'clock. I was driving on the coast, and I drove right by Precious Mountain. High was 61.
Yeah.
End of July.
Don't wear shorts.
No, but the cool thing is like it's so cool that photosynthesis shuts down early, so it gives you this very, very, very long growing season, and this incredible elegance of the wines. It's special stuff. And this picture here, I actually don't know what this picture is. That's
the new Williams-Sonoma.
The new winery. Yeah. Wow,
That's Mr. Dyson's toy.
that's cool. Williams-Sonoma was a gateway wine for me as well. I know you have some incredible experience with these wines.
Well, so they're in 1986, before some of you here were born, I think, in the room. When I took my master's in England, Arthur was still king. Okay, let's just.
It was right after the last.
Merlin
birth.
pinned him.
Yeah, exactly.
He wrote his dinosaur to the exam, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Good one.
And these
Sorry.
are my friends.
Sorry.
But a broker, the guy I used to work with, said, he brought something. I go, I'm not buying more California Pinot Noir. It's absolute garbage, right? If you were a wine judge back then, you were on the Pinot Noir panel, you'd do anything to get off of it.
Yeah.
Hey, you got fruit wines? I'll swap you. Right? You got white Zinfandel? Oh, I love white Zinfandel. I have to take Pinot Noir, right? Because they were so bad, right? And Steve brings me these wines, and we start tasting them. I'm going, this is absolute BS, dude. These are not California Pinot Noirs. He goes, oh, no. These guys are, look, Burt Williams at Cellium. And the winery was originally called Hacienda Del Rio, but Hacienda sued them, so they had to change it to Williams and Cellium. It was being made in their garage. And I said, how much do you have? He goes, 10 cases. I go, I'll take it all. So I'll tell you a really funny story. From then on, that's how loyal the boys were. So every year I'd buy everything they produced. We'd buy everything we get our hands on. Of course, as Williams-Sonoma became famous, and I could still have whatever I wanted. So they would do, I'd buy a pallet every year of all their best things. And they'd take the pallet and they'd wrap it, and when they had their big party, right, release party, they'd put Sharpies all over it so people could write me notes about my allocation. And some of them were not very polite, I must tell you. Not very polite at all.
Why would somebody do that to
When I
you?
left the sardine factory for the next 5 years, they sent me a bottle of everything they made. The thing helped get started because, as well, I brought Peter Morel from Morel's in New York. And I said, I'm going to pour you something. And he goes, that's really expensive Burgundy. I go, it's California Pinot. And he goes, I want the franchise for New York. And so from that, Williams-Sonoma was launched. And of course, they've become great today. So Bob Craval is one of my besties, has been since the beginning. And Precious Mountain, I think it's one of their, it's not going to produce much every year, and some years pretty much none at all. But I'll tell you what, when it's right, this is classic Sonoma Pinot Noir. I love its clever. And you know what's amazing? I've had, my 84s are starting to age, right? My 84 Rocchioli is starting to run out of gas. Don't think about coming by my house, Jay, all right? But it's amazing how long they have lasted. And I would never expect it. I kept bottles back from the very, very beginning to see it. And when I taste this one, I go, this is going to be the same thing. This wine is going to have that same beautiful longevity and wonderment. Because I drank my last 750, I saw a few Magnums, 84 Rocchioli, and I blew a few of my students away. And they thought it was Burgundy. Oh, grasshoppers, you have so much to learn.
That was me, right?
No, that was a little more embarrassing, Dave.
Yeah, it was. Let's don't go there.
He was tasting at my house, and I had one of those really bad days.
Okay, let's don't go there, Fred. Yeah.
And my daughter, who's 7, comes up where they're tasting, and she goes, can I try that wine, Dad? She goes, that's really good, Dad. Meursault, huh? I go, yeah, it is. Good job. And so he's leaving, and I go, some could buy Mr. Stout. She goes, and she called it, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And she's like, Mr. Stout.
Yes, I remember.
You're not very good, are you?
Yeah.
I'm like, Claire. She goes, my dad only teaches the best people, and you need to work harder. So he's like,
I'm standing right here.
How much harder do you want me to work?
He goes out, busts his butt until the exam, comes back and passes. I was so proud of him.
Yeah.
And so was Claire.
Bravo. So, to your question on this, you're asking about the profile and talking about Burgundy, and you haven't been there. One of the things to note about this is, while there's tremendous elegance and there's just beauty in this wine, it is notably riper than the 2 Burgundies, notably. And that's the main thing I want to point out to everybody here is that, in a blind tasting context, this is one of those tells. This kind of ripeness does not happen in Burgundy except by accident.
Yeah, even Sonoma Coast, even our most extreme,
Yeah.
right? Extreme appellations.
And I've got a quick story to tell about Williams-Sonoma too. When I was, coming up and just kind of getting started, I had my first gig as a somm. I made my first trip to California. This was probably 1990, and Williams-Sonoma had just been all over the Wine Spectator. I grew up in Atlanta. They didn't sell Williams-Sonoma in Georgia. They still probably don't. But I wanted to find this wine, and I read in that article that Ed Sellium was the manager of a grocery store in Guerneville. And I knew that if I went there and I talked to the guy, I could probably go get a visit because it was famous that you couldn't go to this winery. So I went to the grocery store and I asked to see Ed Sellium, and it was his day off. And I was so disappointed, and I was wandering around in the wine section of the store, and I bought a couple of bottles of Williams-Sonoma, and I'm checking out, and the assistant manager of the store comes over and says, hey, pardon me for asking this, but why were you asking to see Ed Sellium? And I kind of told him my story and told him what I was doing, and he said, well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'll tell you how to find the winery. Because the address wasn't published. And it's not really a visiting, or it wasn't, at least until now, it wasn't really a visiting kind of winery. And he tells me, here's what he tells me, he said, go up River Road, or West Side Road, make a right on River, and then go down about half a mile, and you're gonna see this huge white sign, black letters about 2 feet tall, that say, no visitors. Turn in there. And I did. It's just a white metal building, very nondescript, some barrels, some racks, some pallets outside, a couple of tanks, gravel driveway. I pull in and a little nervous, I get a business card out of my pocket and I walk up to the metal door and I knock on the door. Nothing. A couple minutes go by, knock on the door again, and I hear, God damn it. Stomp, 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 stomp. Door snatches open and Bert Williams, about 8'6", standing there
Wide.
at the door. Wide, yeah, 10 feet tall. Snatches the door open. What do you want? And very nervously, I handed him my business card and told him my story. And he said, well, guess you better come in. And we tasted for 3 hours. And he taught me, at the very beginning of my career, more about American and Sonoma Pinot Noir than, he taught me stuff I can't even remember. I mean, it was just the most generous day, and he was so generous with his time and his knowledge. And I don't see these guys ever. I know they're both still around, but never see them very much anymore. And so Bert, here's to you.
Beautiful wine.
Cheers.
And Bob Cabal, thank you.
Precious Mountain, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
They're not getting a lot.
Let's taste some Zen, guy.
Yeah.
Swing batter, there you go.
I have to say, I am so excited for this wine.
Well, it's the oldest wine on the
I like to see
table.
you excited.
Frog's Leap. John and Julie Williams, going back into the 80s. They started going, I think John and who was Larry Turley.
At this point, yeah, Larry Turley was still in.
Yeah, they were, they sold their motorcycles to get enough cash to start the business. And just wonderful people. They are now based out of Rutherford. Before they were just sleeping on the frog farm, as it's called, and that's why they came up with Frog's Leap. As John says, after a couple of bottles of wine, we decided to call it, Frog's Leap, and it stuck. It's a great story, great people. They are still based in Rutherford. I think they got their big break when Chuck Carpy, who owned Freemark Abbey back in those days, sold them a little parcel in Rutherford, and he even co-signed on the note to make sure they had enough to get through. And then, of course, Chuck was a great guy. He was one of the original Napa guys. Helped kickstart them in. Beautiful wine. They started with Zinfandel. Originally, they were buying Zinfandel from Spotswood because of the connection. But John had actually helped bottle the 1973 Cabernet that went on to the Judgment of Paris when he was a little cellar rat at Stag's Leap, in Stag's Leap. So he helped bottle that and then went on to work in New York, get his degree, came back and liked Napa and started his business. Met Julie. They got, I don't know, like 5, 6 kids. And it's a gorgeous place. They have really parlayed their success from starting with that Zen and then later Sauvignon Blanc. Now they're famous for their Cabernet. The Rutherford Cab is a signature of Rutherford. John is one of those strange wine guys. Now, he was actually too handsome during Falcon Crest when he was working up in St. Helena. They wouldn't let him on the set, even though he worked at Spring Mountain for a period. They said, yeah, you don't look like a winemaker. You're too handsome. And he's like,
He told you that, right?
well, if you go on his website,
Did you pass the check yet?
he's not that handsome. I think.
Thanks for stating the obvious.
Thank you. But I remember John from back in the 80s, and he and Julie, when they made their trips through Texas, I was lucky enough to sell their wine. It's wonderful people. He, 30 years ago, he became, everyone talked about being, sustainable or organic or biodynamic. And John, you know, his quote, "I'm tired of feeding my vines soda pop and candy bars, you know, the irrigation system. I want to grow, and I want a dirt farm. I want to start it, but I want to dry farm our vineyards." And I think that's their policy to this day.
It is.
So
right.
they are amazing grape grower. And anyone that's been around wine long enough, you understand it's got to come from the field. You're not going to make it in the cellar if you're not doing the right stuff in the field. And he's one of those bio guys. I think he was the first silver or whatever it's called, the lead, L-E-E-D.
Yeah, they were the first lead silver winery.
They were,
That's
and
right.
you know, it's because of John, and it's the same team. I mean, you almost have to die to get a position at Frog's Leap.
Well, you don't have to die.
I am not. This is the old end of the table. I mean, talking about Brad here, but
What are you trying to say?
just saying, his employees don't go away; they get better. He took on people that had been farming those lands. He partners with the right people. Beautiful wine. It's got some age on it. It's really showing some age. I think we're catching it at the right moment. And I'm very honored to even talk about Frog's Leap in this wine.
How many of
Yeah.
you keep Zinfandel at home or regularly drink Zinfandel at home? This to me is a great example of a wine that's gotten a bad rap. Because,
For aging.
For aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there are producers that make wines that are 17.5% alcohol. And then there are people like this that make this elegant, beautiful, pretty side of Zin. My wife and I are very fortunate to get to go to Bern's Steakhouse quite a bit. And we don't have the money that Fred has, so we have to drink Zinfandel.
That's true.
It is true. I mean, Fred goes in and gets William Sellum and DRC all the time, but no, but we go in and we drink these old Zinfandels from the 60s and the 70s and even back to the 50s and the 40s. And the wines are gorgeous. They are just stunningly beautiful. And we forget about California and we forget about that history with Zinfandel and we forget about the elegance that some of these wines have.
Has anybody seen Somm 3?
Yes.
Right? So, you know, the wine that I pour, right, is 1968 Ridge Montebello, Cabernet Sauvignon. But I own one of the great collections of Ridge Zinfandels because Dave Benyon was a great friend of mine, as was Paul Draper. And I probably have over 350 vintages of various and sundry other wines. Many of them almost never, some of them never even released. And I wanted, for that movie, I wanted so bad to bring Ridge Zinfandel. I really wanted to do it, but I knew that competing, when you're going against Jancis and Steven Spurrier, you better bring your A game, right? But I tell you what, of the regrets I have, I wish I have a Magnum of the 73 Geyserville, which I think is one of the most beautiful wines that Ridge ever made.
Incredible.
An incredible wine, and I almost wish I'd have brought it instead of the cab, but it's a movie, what are you gonna do, right?
Montebello was a good call.
The 68 was absolutely super. It blew everybody away, right? That's how great it was. But when you think about Zinfandel, and man, I don't know about you all, your working Somms out there. I love Zinfandel too, like you. But I'm gonna lay an egg on the California wine industry for this one. We've made it in so many different styles that the public is so confused that they don't know what they're going to get when you pull a cork on a bottle of Zinfandel. But when you make Zinfandel like this, you make it beautiful. There's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, you know, even when you have in California, when you have a Zinfandel section, inevitably half of it ends up moving into the elephant's graveyard of wine lists, right? Other reds. And it's sad to say, but I truly hope that, one thing about wine Zinfandel I've got to give it credit for, it saved all those old vineyards that were going to be torn out.
Well, it saved some of them.
Yeah, well, no, it saved quite a few of them, particularly in Napa Valley, right? The few that are left, the head trained vines, and El Dorado for sure. Mm-hmm. So when you see that, but I think, well, Zinfandel, I've drunk these wines. There was a guy named John Raffanella, and Ridge used to make a Raffanella Clara off his vineyard, and they've been farming there since the 1870s. And when I was working at Sarah's Vineyard, and this is outside of Gilroy on Hecker Pass, I used to go up there and drink with him, and he'd pull out wines that his great-grandfather had made, and John was in his 70s. And we're drinking Zinfandel from 1910, 1905, 1898. And I'll tell you, these wines, out under his house, no cellar, right? These wines were beautiful. They were glorious, right? To this day, I remember tasting with them. I'm like, I mean, this is just astounding. You know, old redwood upside tanks, old school, everything else. But you know, when Zinfandel does yeoman's work when you make a well.
Well, I think to your point, like these days, a lot of Zinfandels are being made to taste like barbecue sauce. They're like so full throttle in your face, and there's no longevity in those. Whereas these ones, they're made with elegance and they're blended. I mean, this is not 100% Zin. There's Carignan and Petit Syrah, and I think Grenache or Gamay in this as well. So it's made in a different style.
Yeah.
The Zinfandel presents a problem in the vineyard. It ripens terribly unevenly. You can have a bunch of grapes that literally has green shot berries and raisins on it at the same time. So it forces a decision as a grower or a winemaker. You can either let the bunch get all the way ripe and you're going to have a ton of raisins, or you can knowingly harvest the fruit when most of it's ripe but some of it's still green. And those produce different styles of Zinfandel, and it was the former that I mentioned that really began to drive what I call the blueberry pancake syrup kind of style of Zinfandel at 17.5% alcohol and about 20 grams of residual sugar. I feel like that style is beginning to go away because I think that's what gave Zinfandel the bad rap, that it doesn't age, and it clearly does beautifully. It ages a little atypically in that when they're made in this style, dry farmed with moderate levels of alcohol but very good and clear ripeness, they tend to develop their fruit up to a point and the fruit disappears overnight. It goes from a balanced fruit-driven younger wine to secondary, tertiary flavors, like almost in the same span of time that a Bordeaux variety wine goes through its dumb phase. It happens really quickly. But it's been interesting if you watch Zinfandel and Zinfandel producers, what's going on in California right now. Even some of the stalwart producers that made the bigger, riper style are beginning to retract from that and move towards the older vineyards, the dry farm vineyards that can give them more and better balance.
They're less Parker-esque.
A little bit, yeah, a little less international style with bunny ears.
And by the way, if you go to visit Frog's Leap, what Guy said is true. You know, it's one of the few places left in the Napa Valley where if you go to visit, they're actually happy to see you.
Well, I'll tell you, Zinfandel is one of the great wines on the planet. It was never planted properly in Apulia, or as they go back into Croatia, where they call it, Plavac Mali, or back into the Armenians, where they call it a gorgeous name, Kirill-Najak. Yeah, who wants Kirill-Najak today?
Oh, wait, there's more. Kraliniak Kastelanski.
But there are great producers out there. Ridge is one of the great ones. Klein has the Ancient. And then also, I brought into Texas back in the early 80s, this little guy. He's about 4 foot nothing. Americo Raffinelli. And those are classic styles. If you're looking for classic California Zen, Dry Creek Valley is a great place to start.
Agreed.
I saw 15 minutes. We better get rolling.
We should move along, and we're probably going to go long.
Yeah.
Just a warning.
We're going long. We're the last seminar.
Yeah.
Where are they going to go?
Yeah, you don't really have anywhere else to go until 7 o'clock, so.
Yeah, the bar. Would you hurry up?
Davis is counting on tips tonight. It's going to happen that way.
Okay, moving right along. Any questions on Zinfandel before we head on? Andy, talk to us about Bordeaux.
So one of my fondest memories was the first time I taught with Fred after I passed my exam. Fred gets up to do Bordeaux, as Fred does. He goes, now we're going to do boring dough. And I think Bordeaux was kind of for a long time in there, for a good 15 years. I think a lot of us found Bordeaux to be relatively boring. Price points were getting ridiculously expensive. Wines were not worth what they were being asked for, and there was just kind of a general to me, there was a general ripeness issue where the wines were all starting to blend together and start to taste the same. I think we're past that now, but I think what we're going to see here is a couple examples of the old school style, and then one of a slightly newer style. But Bordeaux is where I grew up and cut my teeth. My dad collected a significant amount of Bordeaux from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so as I was growing up, we would taste wine at night on Sunday nights, and he would pour us a little taste of some of these great wines. And so Bordeaux is you know, if Burgundy is my whoopee now, Bordeaux, when I first got in the industry, was my whoopee. Bordeaux is still, to me, it's not as mentally engaging as Burgundy is, but to me, Bordeaux across the board produces the greatest wines in the world. You can name so many estates that produce phenomenal wine outside of even the 61 classified growths that just are mind-blowing. You've got 100 and some odd. How many Burgundy producers can you name at the same level? And yeah, we're talking a much different scale, but the wines are just they're fascinating. And I see this trend starting of Bordeaux becoming cool again, which is both good and bad. But we've got 3 Bordeauxs that hopefully will make Bordeaux cool again.
No, it's not going to happen. But go ahead.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. Good. I'll drink my Bordeaux with your Burgundy. That's okay.
Can I make a quick comment about this? So you all want to hear a story nobody knows?
No.
No. So when I took my nobody, I don't think I've ever told this to anybody. When I took my master's examination in 1984 in London, I went through all 6 wines, and you know, as the story goes, I did them all by nose. I didn't know any better, right? Worked out. But the wine that stumped me, right? That stumped me was wine 5. And wine 5, I knew it was Merlot. I knew it was Old World, but I couldn't place it. And I nailed everything else. So I'm going to this thing, and I finally looked at him, I said, you know, I said, I'm a little stumped here. I said, but I believe this is Pomerol AOC, which is the dumbest thing in the world because there is no Pomerol AOC. But nobody's selling secondaries, even back then, back in the 80s and 70s. And this is the wine that I missed. And I missed it because it was a Fronsac. I was on the wrong side of the river. Of course, I've never had a Fronsac before, but that was okay. But it was, every time I drink a Pomerol today, I think about that glorious moment in 1984, right? When America made its bones in the world of the sommelier.
Yay, Fred.
Yay.
Thanks for doing that for us.
Thank you.
Well, I have my regrets, but you're here today. That's important.
Hey, there you go. So 1994, Chateau L'Église Clinay from Pomerol. 1994 was far from a celebrated vintage. It had come after 3 successive years of terrible, garbage, and awful wines. In 91, 92, 93.
Well, how do you really feel, Andy? Let it all out.
Yeah, well, I was going to use other words, but, you know. James,
It's a family seminar.
yeah, James gets upset when I say fuck, so it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Chateau L'Église Clinay. Pomerol is this view of kind of the epitome of Merlot. Bordeaux, obviously, growing far more Merlot than they do Cabernet Sauvignon, even though most of the Cabernet Sauvignon is more celebrated than the Merlot. To me, Pomerol it doesn't necessarily get a bad rap, but it is, to me, it is the epitome of what Merlot can be. There's a lot of clay in the soils here, some sand, some limestone, some different things, but it's not entirely Merlot. So L'Église Clinay currently is at 84% Merlot. It is 15% Cabernet Franc and 1% Malbec. And they're actually moving towards increasing the Cabernet Franc percentage rather than increasing the Merlot percentage.
Which is a move backwards for them because they used to be planted to more Cabernet Franc.
It is, and what we saw not too long ago was that Petit Verdot is making a huge inroads into Pessac Léognan and up into the Medoc as well. So we're starting to see a shift in grape varietals. which is kind of interesting and unique.
Yeah.
So this wine is interesting because there's a couple of historical things in the name. This wine, up until about 1955, was not Chateau L'Église Clinay. This was Clos L'Église Clinay. There were two vineyards that came together that were surrounded by a clos. Two different families. The family where the original L'Église, where that wine originally came from, was they didn't want to farm. They sourced it out. They let other people make the wine. A lot of negociants would buy the grapes and make their wine and sell it under that label. But it was really around then where the two families were the Clinay family. There is a Chateau Clinay out there as well that is equally spectacular.
Also tasty.
Yeah, really spectacular. So it was two families that came together for this one parcel to create this wine. So it's not really a negociant wine. It's not really. It's just two families that enjoyed wine. 94, as it's kind of aged to me, has been a little bit like 1998 in California, where it was written off so badly just because it was not a great vintage like 1990 or 89 or 88 or 86 or 85 that we saw in Bordeaux. But people wanted it to be really good. So it was good, but, you know, as it's aged to me, the wine has shown what some of these cool vintages do, some of these vintages that are not spectacular, which is they show this beautiful elegance. And Pomerol, to me, in itself, its core is elegance. And having elegance in an elegant vintage makes it just such a, to me, it's a beautiful, beautiful wine.
So,
Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, you know, like as a sommelier, yeah, of course you gotta pay attention to the hot vintages, but you gotta pay attention to these kind of other off vintages as well, because they can be gorgeous just for drinking, maybe not for collecting. I mean, I pulled up a review for this wine from Wine Spectator. The current review is like 87 points, tart, charmless, and showing the underripe character for the vintage. Drink up, this is only going to get worse. I mean, the wine is really pretty.
And ironically, the Parker review was glowing. Parker loved this wine, and you know, so if you follow the critic follies, you know,
You're gonna miss some good juice.
you can miss some stuff. And I think, and to Andy's point, Parker really got this one right. He knew that it was a great bottle of wine, and in fact, I think he called it one of the, not the star, but one of the stars of the vintage.
Yes, that is correct. This one, you know, L'Église Clinay, if you're looking for a value in Pomerol, which I think is an oxymoron, because there aren't any, right?
Military intelligence.
But I gotta say, year in, year out, L'Église Clinay delivers, you know, and they deliver in the tough vintages as well. And if I see it on a wine list and it has a couple years on it, I mean, I'm always inclined to buy it because I think it's one of the few great values left in Pomerol for the quality you get even in the tough years. And let's face it, particularly in the last 7 or 8 years, they've not had a lot of great news in Bordeaux.
Yeah, other than price. The price.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
for them.
Yeah.
Well, back in the early 80s, 82 is when Église turned the corner.
Yeah.
That's when they really cleaned it up. Up until that point, the cellars actually still had dirt floors.
Oh, so did Lafite.
So, yeah. So, you know, and we were talking, well, I was listening yesterday in the Burgundy seminars with Raj and Larry Stone. And they're talking about the taste of the place and how really up until the 1960s and 70s, a lot of the great chateaux weren't bottling their own wine. Back in the 50s, 60s, they were shipping in barrel. And they let the negociants bottle their wine for them. And you
Add a
can
little
see,
something to it while they're at it.
yeah, it's a little
And the
something.
giant proliferation of label variation, which has made, you know,
Yeah.
collecting and
Oh,
buying old
it was a
wines at this
nightmare.
point a
Right.
real crapshoot, and you really, really have to study that stuff incredibly deep and in very, very deep detail so that you don't get robbed.
But since the 80s, these guys have really turned it on. And I mean, if you're looking for a great Pomerol, Église Clinay,
Yep.
very good.
Beautiful wine. Any thoughts or questions here? No? How about another Bordeaux?
All right. Swing better.
2005, arguably the most celebrated vintage of that decade. you know, the wines are structured and the wines have an intensity to them. For me, when the wines I tend to enjoy most of all are the more cool vintages rather than the warm vintages. But things like 05 just have this beautiful long structure to them.
I think this wine is not showing 10 years old. I mean, I think it's really, really brilliant. But that's a characteristic of Burns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go to Burns and you drink wine at Burns Steakhouse, and they never seem as old as they are, ever. Their cellar conditions are outstanding, and they do such a great job at buying. You know, I'd like to
never
give
been
all
to
those guys a
Burns.
plug
You know, I
because they
need
do
to
such
go.
a tremendous job. So if you're preparing for an exam, don't base your aging assessment on your visits to Burns.
But do go.
But go.
It's really good.
So I spent 12 years of my life chasing Bern Laxer. I was number 2, he was number 1, right? I was number 1 on the West Coast. And I swear to God, I go up to him at the Grand Awards every year. I go right behind him, goes here, I go, don't you die, old man, until I catch you. And his wife, Gert, swore I kept him alive another 10 years.
All right, I think we got about 8 minutes left to do one last little wine here.
This is a bit of a treasure, my friend.
Chateau La Mandat. This thing.
In half bottle. So 1998, La Mandat Saint-Emilion Premier Grand Cru Classé. 98 was a little bit like, initially was not perhaps viewed as great as it ended up being. I'll argue from my personal palate that 1998 is one of the greatest right bank vintages that I've ever seen since I've been alive. Which is not nearly
you
as
drink
long
all
as
your
you
wines?
have. Almost.
Okay, no wonder, okay.
Yeah.
1998, huh?
Yeah.
Strong right bank.
Yeah, it's really strong right bank. Left bank, Fred can drink those, but I'll take the right bank. You know, the quality of the Merlot was just so elegant, and it got perfectly ripe, and everything on the right bank was just so beautiful. We tend to classify Bordeaux as Bordeaux, and you know, we knocked Robert Parker a little bit earlier. We're going to give him I'm going to give a little kudos right now, in that when they started doing their vintage guides and started looking at Bordeaux, it was not just Bordeaux. It's Medoc, it's Pessac-Léognan, it's Sauternes, and then it's right bank. And there's something to that because the weather conditions and you know, don't forget Merlot ripens so differently than Cabernet Sauvignon. And you get such different flavors, and you can have a terrible Cabernet Sauvignon vintage and a really spectacular Merlot vintage. And to me, that's what you get with this particular wine in this vintage.
And another one that
The
is not
47 vintage probably being the most legendary example.
I wasn't alive in 47.
You never had a 47?
No.
No, the 47
47.
vintage, if you look at the 47 Cheval Blanc being one of the greatest wines I've ever tasted of all time.
Indeed.
I had it 4 times, 5 times, I think. And, but on the Medoc, right? But on the right bank, superb. Absolutely superb.
So another wine that's presenting way younger than it actually shows on the vintage statement. So I was wrong about something. They need to flip the room, and so we got the hook.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
That's exactly right. And you can take your glass of Mandat or whatever else you like as long as you leave it outside. On behalf of TexSom, SOMMFoundation, and all of my fellow panelists, we want to thank you for being here with us today and giving us your ears and kind attention. It's a great honor.